Hello friends, welcome to YouTube, Stackbeast here. So in this video, we are going to learn about the JavaScript functions. So functions are basically a block of a code that are used to perform some specified task and that can be used again and again. That is, they are reusable. So function in a JavaScript can be defined using a function keyword and then specifying the name for function as, we'll call it say hello, and then using a parenthesis and then the body of the function, and we can write the code of the function here. So in this simple function, we are going to write a message to the console saying hello world, and let's save and execute. So we see there is nothing in the output. This is because we have defined the function but we have not called it. So in order to execute the function, we need to call it, and we can execute the function with its name followed by a parenthesis and the terminator. So you see hello world and the output. So we know about the functions that they can not only execute the code inside it, but they can also return a final value after the execution of code. So we can create a function that will perform some specified task and at the end will return a value for us. So we're going to change this program to something like, initially this program will say executing the function, and once this line is executed, we can return a message saying hello world. So now if we will run this program, you will see executing the function, but still this value is never being used because this value is actually returned at the place where the function is called. So we can either store this message in some variable and then print that variable like this. So we have stored the value in a message. So this function will execute and return a value of hello world, and then we can just log it to the consoles. So you see hello world here. So this is how you can make the function to execute some specific task and return the value from that function. We could have also eliminated the use of this variable and directly print the message here by removing this variable and directly using this function here and removing this terminator from the function, and you see the same output. So the parameter to a function are basically an input that can be used by a function to perform some specific task. Let's remove all this and try to create a function to add two numbers. So we can create a function saying function add num, and it will take the input arguments. So you can define a parameter to a function by giving it a name inside the parenthesis. In this program, I want to receive the two inputs, so I will call a comma b. So a and b will be referred now as a variable that can be passed to this function when we will call the function. So this function will now print the sum of these two numbers. So we can say a plus b. And now let's call this function. So we can call this function as add num, and now we know that this function takes in the two input argument. The input defined at function declarations are called parameter, and the value being passed to them are called argument. So whatever value we passed it when we are calling this function, they will be received in the corresponding variable of a and b. So if I pass 5, 5, so this 5 will be received at the a and this 5 will be received at the b, and now this function has access to a and b. So we can save the program and run it, and you see the output like 10. So this might be a case when you want to define a variable arguments to a function and you are not sure about how many numbers you want to add. So you can do this in JavaScript using a spread operator. We will create a separate video on the spread operator, But for this tutorial, you can think it as some special input arguments with the variable values. So you can use it as a 3 dot followed by a some name. So I'll call it a args. So in this args can receives now a multiple argument, and instead of a 2, you can pass any much argument you want to pass. So now in order to access all the variables in this args parameter, we need to create a for loop on this arg. So we have seen a for of loop in the previous video. We can make it for x of args. We can create this loop, and let's just define a variable initially called sum equals 0, and here we can make it sum equals sum plus x. So basically whatever argument we will pass, this loop will iterate through all of the arguments and add them to the sum variable, and at the end print the sum variable. So we have made a mistake here. We have made this variable as a const. So that's why its value cannot be reinitialized again. So we need to change it to let. So you see the output is 21. So in this way, you can define the multiple input arguments to a function. So as we have discussed in our first video, the functions in JavaScript are kind of an object. So we can store this function declaration inside a variable and then call that variable as a function. So we can simply do const and give it some name. I'll again call it add num, and then assigns a equals to value to this, and now we can change this add num identifier from here and keep this function as an anonymous function, that is a function without a name. And now we have changed this a to the lowercase, so I'll also make it lowercase. And now you see this function is now being stored inside a variable, and that variable is being called as a function. So this is like the same output. So you can also store the function inside the variables. Arrow functions are basically the better way to write the function syntax. So we can define a function now using const and we'll give it any name. We'll call it msg, and then instead of writing function keyword, we can directly write the parenthesis and followed by equal to and greater than symbol and then the body of the function. So this is equivalent to defining an anonymous function. So arrow functions basically allow us to remove the function keyword and use this syntax here to create a function, and then we can do pretty much everything which we can do in a normal function. And in order to call this function, we need to use the same logic where we define the name of the function followed by a parenthesis, and let's save it and execute. You see the same output. The parameters in the arrow functions can also be defined in the same manner, where in the parenthesis we can define the input argument and then print those input argument here and pass the input arguments from here like 5 and 5. So you see the same output there. Arrow functions also helps us to omit this function's body, and if you want to write some small function code which returns the value in a single line, so we can omit this function body and directly write the return value here. So if we omit or leave the body or a curly braces of the function declaration of the arrow function and write the value directly after these arrows, so this is equivalent to return a plus b. So you can also leave the return keyword and this value will be returned to the message variable, and you will see this has a same output. So we will be using this kind of a syntax in the future. So I hope you have got the idea about this syntax. So this was the quick lookup over the function. I hope you like the video, and if you do like the video, please like, comment, share and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon